Okay. Now let's move on to a totally separate thing here. This is design process. And the purpose of this is just to help you become a little bit more familiar with design process in general. This design process is used in all of engineering. It's a really important piece. So this is the only time this year that we're going to talk about this in detail, but focus. All right, so for architecture, in architecture, usually these four components: define the problem, brainstorm, research and generate ideas, and identify constraints. That's what an architect is doing. They're trying to figure out, what do I need to do? Where's the location going to be? What kind of style? How do we want to plan the interior space? What design elements and materials and systems do we need to do? That's all of the defining problem, researching ideas, identifying constraints. This is the architect. After this, then it's a structural design. So they kind of establish architecture, or the architectural engineer establishes the preliminary structural systems. So if you want to be an architectural engineer, that's what you're going to be doing. The structural engineer takes a look at what the architectural engineer does, and they try to figure out, how can I actually build this cheap enough, strong enough, stable enough that someone's actually going to want to build it. So they do more identifying criteria and constraints, and they try to figure out what the loads are. So if you're trying to think about what exactly do I need to write down here, what I would do if I were you is I would label 1 through 12, and I would identify these things. Note, number 1 is define problem, 2 is brainstorm, and then maybe after you've written down 1 through 4, maybe say architecture, or architectural engineer does those things. And then once we get to 4, kind of overlaps, 4 through 12, that's going to be more of the structural engineer. And once we get down to here, the create and make, then we're getting into the construction phase itself. So hopefully that helps you kind of with your notes. All right, so the structural engineer then is trying to figure out loads. They're looking at constraints, and then exploring the possibilities. They try to figure out, how else can we build this? How else can we move things around? So they will actually possibly change the architectural design if it's more structurally sound, if it's a lot more cost effective, and then they give that back to the architectural engineer and say, hey, this is going to be a lot cheaper. What if we do this? Explore the possibility to make it cheaper to do. So then they, along with the architectural engineer and that company, they select an approach. So they develop the proposal, they create the plan for it, so that's here. Then they're, instead of modeling or making a prototype, what they're going to do is do it on like a Revit design software. And that model or that prototype might actually just be the 3D model that they're creating. So that's often what you end up doing, is the 3D architecture software in the model or prototype phase. The testing and evaluating. So just for this one, if you choose like a joist that weighs 20 pounds per foot. What? To test and evaluate, you can't actually just build it, an entire bridge, and then drive a ginormous truck over it and then watch it collapse and then say, oh, okay, well then it looks like it wasn't strong enough. You actually have to do structural analysis of using modeling software. That's the 3D architecture software. So for example, if you choose a joist that weighs 20 pounds per foot, so that'd be a pretty heavy joist, but then it turns out that that's not strong enough to handle the loads based on your structural analysis software, then you might say, okay, we're going to have to revise this and choose a 25 pound per foot. So it's going to be heavier, but it's actually a stronger beam. So then that's kind of where you are revising and refining things based on your testing and evaluations. And at that point, once you've done this process over and over and over here, then you actually make this. You actually create the final drawings of the structural design, and then you give them to the bid phase, which is going to include construction drawings, and then someone may actually bid for this project. Usually it would be probably the city that bids on it, and then they say, okay, we can do it for this price, so we'll choose your bid because you can do it for the least amount of money, we like your designs, and so on. So that's all that you need to know for Intro to Structural Engineering.